Move! Move! The CEO is coming up. The security guard's voice cracked through the hallway like a gunshot. Heels clicked fast against marble, doors swung shut, heads disappeared behind corners. In 30 seconds flat, the entire executive floor of Hanseong Tower emptied like someone had pulled a fire alarm because everyone knew what those words meant. But Linda George did not run. Instead, she just grabbed her cleaning cart, pulled it sideways and pressed herself flat against the wall. 3 months in this building had taught her one thing. When Kang Tae-Hyun moved through a floor, you became invisible. As she turned the corner to take a shortcut through the side corridor, the elevator doors suddenly opened at the exact same time. She didn't see him until it was already too late. Her cart hit his side hard and her foot slipped on the wet floor. She was already falling when her hand shot out and her fingers locked around his bare wrist for like 1 second. Or maybe less. His reaction was immediate and violent. He wrenched his arm away and pushed her hard, sending her stumbling backward into the wall. "What is wrong with you?" But Kang Tae-Hyun wasn't looking at her. He wasn't listening to a single word she said. His eyes had dropped to his wrist, his jaw was tight. His entire body had gone completely still because he was waiting. He was always waiting after contact. For the burning sensation to start crawling up his skin. For the rash to spread up his arm like it had done every single time. For 30 years every single time. Without exception, without mercy, and without fail. He waited for 10 seconds, but his skin stayed perfectly calm. Behind him, Linda snatched her mop off the floor, her jaw tight, her eyes blazing. "Crazy rich people," she muttered. "No bow, no apology." She turned her back on the most feared man in Seoul and walked away like he was absolutely nobody. And Kang Tae-Hyun stood frozen in that empty hallway long after her footsteps faded. Still staring at his wrist, still waiting for something that wasn't coming. In 30 years, not one single person had ever touched him without consequence. Not one until tonight, until a cleaning girl grabbed his wrist, called him crazy and didn't even bother to learn his name. Okay, listen, if that opening just stopped your breath for a second, you are not alone. This story is about going places you are not ready for. And I also need you to know that this is only part 1. What happens next between these two will break you completely. So subscribe right now and hit the bell so part 2 finds you the moment it drops. And drop a comment, what do you think just happened to him when she touched him? I need to see your theories, let's go. Linda found out the next morning. She was in the break room pouring cheap instant coffee when one of the other cleaners slid a phone across the table. "That man you crashed into last night?" Linda looked at the screen and saw a news article. There was a picture of the man from the hallway. Same cold eyes, same dark suit. Standing in front of Hanseong Tower at some kind of press event. And the headline read, "Kang Tae-Hyun, CEO of Hanseong Corporation." Linda stared at the picture for a long moment before she put the phone down and picked up her coffee. "Good for him," she said flatly. The other cleaner looked at her like she had lost her mind. But who exactly was Kang Tae-Hyun? To Seoul's business world, he was untouchable. Hanseong Corporation dominated the city's financial district like a steel fist wrapped in glass. Real estate, tech, private security, international trade. The company's reach stretched across industries that most people couldn't even name, and at the center of all of it stood one man. 34 years old, never married, no known close friends, no scandals, no weaknesses, at least none that anyone could find. But Seoul's business empire was only half the story because beneath the press conferences and the shareholder meetings and the perfectly controlled public image, Tae-Hyun controlled something the newspapers never printed. A criminal network that moved through Seoul's underground like a current running under still water. You couldn't see it, but you could feel it. Rival organizations had tried to challenge it twice in 5 years, and both times they disappeared so completely that people stopped asking what happened. Government officials who got too curious suddenly found reasons to look elsewhere. Judges developed selective memory. Investigators retired early. Kang Tae-Hyun had built a world where no one came close enough to threaten him, and the reason went deeper than power. Because Tae-Hyun had a condition. Since childhood, the moment another person's bare skin made contact with his body declared war on itself. Burning rashes spread up his arms within seconds. His throat tightened, and his chest closed. Doctors spent years running every test they knew. Most agreed on the same diagnosis: a severe and rare allergic disorder. Untreatable, permanent, and absolute. A small number of specialists believed something different. They suspected it wasn't physical at all. They used words like neurological, words like trauma response, words like the body remembering what the mind tries to forget. Tae-Hyun fired every single one of them because he didn't want theories or sympathy. He wanted distance, so he built it. No handshakes and no contact. A 1-meter rule that every person in his life understood without being told twice. Employees kept their distance. His criminal network operated through intermediaries. Even his own bodyguards knew never to touch him. For 34 years, Kang Tae-Hyun had made himself completely unreachable. A man the world could see but never touch. And then a Nigerian cleaning girl grabbed his wrist in a hallway, and his body did absolutely nothing. He had spent 34 years building walls that no one could breach, and she had knocked straight through them without even trying. That same night, Tae-Hyun sat alone in his private office on the top floor of Hanseong Tower. The city glittered 40 floors below him, but he wasn't looking at it. Instead, he was looking at a screen, a security footage of the hallway, timestamped 11:47 p.m. He watched it once, then replayed it and watched it again and again. Without taking his eyes off the screen, he leaned forward and zoomed in on the exact moment her fingers wrapped around his wrist. Play it again. His assistant, Jung-ho, stood near the door with the stillness of someone who had learned a long time ago not to ask questions. He nodded and played it again. Tae-Hyun watched his own face on the screen. The push, the stumble backward, the way he had stood frozen in that hallway, staring at his wrist like a man who had just witnessed something that violated every law of nature he had ever known. Because that was exactly what it felt like. A violation of everything he understood about his own body. Who is she? Jung-ho cleared his throat quietly. Her name is Linda George, Nigerian national, international student at Seoul Business University. She's been on the cleaning staff here for 3 months, night shift. She works here to cover her tuition and living expenses. Tae-Hyun said nothing, his eyes still locked on the image of Linda on the screen. Does she know who I am? Jung-ho hesitated. Based on her reaction, sir, no. She didn't recognize you at all. Just then the door to the office opened quietly. A man entered without knocking, which meant he was one of the 3 people in Tae-Hyun's entire organization permitted to do so. Kang Seo-jin, head of internal operations, 12 years in Tae-Hyun's network. The kind of loyalty that had been tested and proven so many times it had stopped being questioned. He glanced at the frozen image on the screen. Cleaning staff? He asked. Yes, Jung-ho replied. Seo-jin looked at the screen for 1 moment longer than necessary before he set a folder on the desk. Eastern District Report, when you have a moment. He walked back as quietly as he had entered. Tae-Hyun didn't look up from the screen, and in that moment Seo-jin paused at the door for just a second, long enough to look back at the frozen image of Linda one more time. Then he was gone. Tae-Hyun leaned back in his chair again and looked at the footage one more time. In 34 years, not one person had ever touched him without an agenda behind it. Power, money, leverage, fear. Even the people closest to him kept him at a careful distance. Not out of respect, but out of self-preservation. But this woman had grabbed him to stop herself from falling. No agenda, no awareness, no fear. She didn't even know she had done something impossible. She just called him crazy and walked away. Tae-Hyun turned the screen off, stood up, walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked out at the city below. Seoul stretched endlessly in every direction. Millions of people, millions of lives pressing against each other every single day. And somewhere in this city a girl was probably sleeping without a single thought about what she had done to him tonight. What shift does she work tomorrow? He suddenly asked. Jung-ho checked his tablet immediately. Same shift, sir, at 11 p.m. Executive floor. Tae-Hyun didn't turn around. Make sure she is assigned to this floor again. Sir, you have to. You heard me. Kang Tae-Hyun had spent his entire life avoiding people. But that night, for the first time in 34 years, he was looking for one. Linda showed up for her shift the next night with no idea what was waiting for her. She clocked in, pulled on her work gloves and grabbed her cart. The night supervisor met her at the elevator with a clipboard. "George, they have moved you to the executive floor again tonight." Linda frowned. "I was just up there last night. And now you are up there again." The supervisor shrugged. "Don't ask me questions. The orders are from above." Linda looked up angrily because in this building that word meant only one thing. She pushed her cart into the elevator without another word. The executive floor was empty when she arrived. Quiet the way only expensive places are quiet, like the air itself cost money. She started at the far end of the corridor and worked her way down slowly, spraying, wiping, and moving. She was halfway down the hallway when she felt the uncomfortable feeling of being watched. So she stopped and turned around slowly. Kang Tae-Hyun was standing at the end of the corridor, perfectly still, with both hands in his pockets, just staring at her. Linda stared at him for a long moment. "Are you serious right now?" He didn't answer her and he didn't move. She turned back to her cart. "Crazy rich people," she muttered again under her breath. A second later, she heard his footsteps, echoing slowly on the marble floor, drawing closer. Linda kept working and refused to turn around. The footsteps stopped right behind her, close enough that she could feel the shift in the air. Reluctantly, she turned around and asked, "Okay, what do you want?" Tae-Hyun looked at her for a moment without speaking. Then, without any warning, he reached out and wrapped his fingers strongly around her wrist. Linda's eyes went wide. "Excuse me, what are—" "Don't move." His voice was quiet, but underneath it was something she couldn't quite name. She went still, not because she was afraid of him, but because something in his voice made her stop. Tae-Hyun closed his eyes as his grip on her wrist stayed hard. The seconds stretched out between them like a held breath. His men stationed at the end of the corridor watched in complete silence. They had worked for this man for years, and they had never once seen him touch another human being willingly. 5 seconds passed and then 10. Tae-Hyun opened his eyes slowly and his skin was perfectly calm. No burning, no redness, no reaction at all. He released her wrist and stepped back. Linda snatched her arm away immediately. "What the hell is wrong with you? You can't just grab people." "You are not afraid of me," Tae-Hyun whispered. It wasn't a question. It was said with quiet disbelief, like he was still trying to understand it. Linda looked at him like he had completely lost his mind. "Why would I be afraid of you?" she asked. "Everyone is," he shrugged. She let out a short, sharp laugh. "Well, I am not everyone." Then she grabbed her cart and started pushing it down the corridor. "And if you grab my wrist one more time, I am filing a complaint. CEO or not." She didn't look back. Tae-Hyun stood exactly where she had left him. His men exchanged a single glance. In all their years working for him, no one had ever spoken to Kang Tae-Hyun like that. Not a rival, not a government official, not a single person in Seoul's entire criminal underground. And somehow that made it worse. Because as Linda George disappeared around the corner with her cleaning cart, Kang Tae-Hyun realized something that unsettled him far more than the absence of a rash. He wanted her to come back. "Okay, I have to stop you right here because if you are feeling what I am feeling right now, this story is just getting started and it is about to get so much more intense. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it right now. And drop a comment below. Do you think Linda has any idea what she's just walked into? Because I need to know what you think." Word traveled fast in Hanseong Tower. Not through announcements, not through official channels. Through whispers, the careful kind that moved between employees like smoke under a door. By the time Linda arrived for her shift 2 nights later, every single person on the cleaning staff knew. The new girl had argued with Kang Tae-Hyun twice and still had a job. The older women looked at her differently now. Not with admiration exactly, with something closer to disbelief. "You should be careful," one of them told her quietly in the break room. "That man doesn't forget things." Linda poured her coffee. "Neither do I." But being careful wasn't something that came naturally to Linda George. She had grown up in Lagos in a house where speaking your mind was survival, where silence meant you agreed, where agreeing meant you disappeared. Her mother had raised her with one rule above all others. Never let a powerful man make you small, Linda. Not once, not ever. She had carried that rule from Lagos to Seoul. Through visa applications and language barriers and 12-hour flights and a university that made her feel like a visitor in every single room. She had carried it through 3 months of midnight cleaning shifts in a building full of people who looked straight through her like she wasn't there. And she wasn't about to drop it now. Not for a CEO with boundary issues and a God complex. Not for anyone. 3 days passed without incident. No sign of Tae-Hyun on the executive floor. No reassignments. No late-night confrontations in empty corridors. Linda started to think the whole thing was over. She was mopping the hallway outside the boardroom on the 4th night when the doors opened and a stream of men in expensive suits filed out. Linda pressed herself to the side and kept her head down. The last man through the door was Tae-Hyun. He stopped when he saw her while the other men kept walking without looking back. As silence settled over the hallway, Linda kept mopping and didn't look up. "You are still here," he said. "I work here," she replied flatly. "Where else would I be? Most people in your position would have requested a transfer to a different floor by now." Linda finally looked up. "Most people in my position are afraid of you. And you are not? We've had this conversation." She went back to mopping. Tae-Hyun watched her for a moment before he did something that made the 2 bodyguards at the end of the corridor physically straighten. He crouched down, right there in the hallway, picked up the spray bottle she had knocked off her cart when the boardroom doors opened, and held it out to her. Linda stared at the bottle, then at him. "Did you just—" "You dropped it," he interrupted. She took it slowly, like she was waiting for the catch, but there wasn't one. Tae-Hyun stood back up, straightened his jacket and walked away down the corridor. As Linda watched him go, something about that small simple moment sat strangely in her chest. This man had pushed her into a wall, grabbed her wrist without permission, had her reassigned to his floor without asking, and now he was picking up her cleaning supplies off the floor like it was nothing. "Hey you!" He stopped, but didn't turn around. "What's actually wrong with you?" she asked. "And I don't mean that as an insult. I mean, what actually happens when people touch you?" The corridor went very still at that moment. His bodyguards exchanged a look because nobody asked Kang Tae-Hyun personal questions. He stood with his back to her for a long moment before he turned around slowly. His expression hadn't changed, but something behind his eyes had changed. Something that looked almost like surprise. "Why do you want to know?" Linda shrugged. "Because you grabbed my wrist like a science experiment and stared at your own arm like you had seen a ghost, twice." She tilted her head. "That's not normal CEO behavior even in Seoul." The silence stretched between them. Then, quietly, almost to himself, "It burns," he said. "Every time someone touches me, it burns and spreads and doesn't stop for hours." Linda looked at him steadily. "But not with me?" Tae-Hyun held her gaze for one long moment. "Not with you." With that he turned and walked away. This time she let him go. But she stood in that hallway for a long time after his footsteps faded, thinking about a man who had built an entire empire around one simple terrible truth. That human touch, the most basic thing in the world, had always felt like pain to him. He had just told a cleaning girl something he had never told another living soul. And he had no idea why. Started small. The way the most dangerous things always do. The next evening Tae-Hyun was in his office when Jung-ho appeared at the door. "Sir, the cleaning staff have clocked in." Tae-Hyun didn't look up from his desk. "And Miss George is on the 4th floor tonight. Not the executive level." Tae-Hyun set his pen down slowly. "Fix that." Linda noticed the pattern on the 3rd reassignment, so she cornered the night supervisor in the supply room with her arms crossed and her jaw set. "Why do I keep getting moved to the executive floor?" she asked. The supervisor wouldn't meet her eyes. "Scheduling," he muttered. 3 times in 1 week is not scheduling," Linda argued. "Miss George, you? Who is requesting it?" she interrupted. When he didn't say anything after a long moment, Linda just grabbed her cart and walked out. She found Tae-Hyun exactly where she knew she would. He was standing near the floor-to-ceiling window at the end of the executive corridor, looking out at the city like he owned it. Which, in a way, he did. Linda parked her cart and walked straight up to him. You need to stop. He turned to look at her, completely unbothered. Stop what? Having me reassigned up here every single night. Tae-Hyun shrugged. The executive floor needs cleaning. There are 14 other cleaners on staff, Linda insisted. I prefer the results you deliver. Linda stared at him. That is the most expensive way anyone has ever said something creepy to me. Something flickered at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, but close enough that it stopped her for just a second. I am serious. It's weird. It makes the other staff uncomfortable. And frankly, she lowered her voice slightly. It's making me uncomfortable too. Tae-Hyun turned fully to face her. Does it? Yes. Then why are you still standing here? Linda opened her mouth, then closed it. He had a point, and she hated that he had a point. Because someone needs to tell you that you can't just move people around like pieces on a board because you feel like it. I run a billion-dollar corporation, he said simply. Moving people is literally my job. I am not one of your employees. You work in my building, he reminded her. I work for a cleaning company that has a contract with your building. There is a difference. The corner of his mouth moved again, definitely closer to a smile this time. You argue like a lawyer, Tae-Hyun said. I study business, so it's the same thing. There was a moment of silence. Then, have you eaten? Linda blinked in surprise. What? Tonight? Have you eaten? She stared at him. That is a completely random question. It's 11:40 p.m. Your shift started at 11. You came straight from a 4-hour evening lecture according to your university schedule. He paused. So have you eaten? At that moment the air in the corridor shifted and Linda felt it. That uncomfortable realization that he knew more about her daily life than she had ever told him. You looked into me? Linda asked, surprised. I look into everyone. That is not. There's food in the executive dining room, he interrupted. It will go to waste otherwise. I am not eating your food. Why not? Because I don't want to owe you anything. He looked at her for a long moment and something shifted behind his eyes. What exactly do you think I want from you, Linda? The sound of her name in his mouth stopped her completely because he had never used it before and it landed differently than she expected. She held his gaze. I don't know yet, she said carefully. And that's exactly why I'm not eating your food. Then she turned back to her cart. Good night, Mr. Kang. She pushed the cart down the corridor and didn't look back. Behind her, Tae-Hyun watched her go. But then after a while, he turned back to the window, his reflection looking back at him in the dark glass. For the first time in longer than he could remember, the distance he had built around himself didn't feel like protection. It felt like a wall he was standing on the wrong side of. He had everything Seoul could offer a man. Power, money, control. And he was standing alone in an empty corridor at midnight, wishing a cleaning girl would turn around. Well, she ate the food. Not because he asked her to, not because she owed him anything, but because she was 23 years old, running on 4 hours of sleep and instant coffee, and the smell coming from the executive dining room at midnight was completely unfair. She told herself it meant nothing, it was just food. And somehow it became a pattern neither of them named. Linda would finish cleaning her corridor. Then Tae-Hyun would appear and they would argue about something small and specific. She would tell him he was impossible. He would say something that was technically not an insult but felt like a compliment wrapped in one. She would leave, he would watch her go. And just like that, the next night, they would do it all over again. The other cleaners noticed, his bodyguards noticed, Jung-ho noticed most of all and said absolutely nothing because he valued his continued employment. 2 weeks in, Tae-Hyun appeared at the elevator just as Linda was clocking out at 3 a.m. His jacket was off, sleeves rolled up, which meant he had been working since before she arrived. I'll have a car take you home. Linda shouldered her bag. No, thank you. I take the subway. It's 3 in the morning. I have been taking the subway at 3 in the morning since I got to Seoul. I am fine. Linda, you? Good night, Mr. Kang. As she stepped into the elevator, he put his hand on the door before it could close. Not touching her, just stopping the door. They looked at each other through the gap. One car, he said quietly. That's all. Something about the way he said it made her pause. Not the words, the underneath of the words. Like he wasn't asking as a CEO arranging transport. Like he was asking as something else entirely. Something he didn't have a title for yet. She held his gaze for a long moment. I don't need protection. I know you don't. Then why are you? Because I want to know you get home safe. That's all. The elevator hummed quietly between them. Linda looked at him. Past the cold eyes and the expensive suit and the empire and the criminal network and the condition and all the walls and all the distance. And saw something she hadn't expected to find there. Something that looked a lot like loneliness. The specific kind that comes not from being alone, but from being surrounded by people who are all afraid of you. She let out a slow breath. Fine, she said quietly. One car. Something moved across his face so fast she almost missed it. Like relief, raw and unguarded and gone again in less than a second. He stepped back from the elevator door. She watched it close between them. In the car on the way home, Linda pressed her forehead against the cool window and watched Seoul blur past in streaks of neon and rain. She thought about his face in that elevator gap, that single unguarded second. She had met powerful men before, men who used their power like a weapon pointed outward. Tae-Hyun used his like a wall pointed inward. Like the whole empire wasn't about conquest. Like it was about making sure nobody ever got close enough to hurt him again. And without meaning to, without asking for it, she had started to care about what he was feeling. She closed her eyes. Don't, she whispered to herself in the dark of the car. Don't do it, Linda. But she did it anyway. The following Friday, Tae-Hyun had back-to-back meetings from 7 in the morning until 9 at night. Linda found him at 10 p.m. standing alone on the executive floor with a coffee going cold in his hand and the particular stillness of a man running completely empty. She looked at him for a moment before she made a decision she knew she would probably regret. Come on, she said. He looked at her, confused. Come on to where? Out, she replied. Out to where? He asked. You look like you haven't seen actual air in 3 days, so, come on. Linda, I have things. Work, yes. You always have work. She tilted her head. When last did you eat something that wasn't delivered to this floor? There was silence. When last did you stand somewhere that wasn't this building? More silence. Come on, Mr. Kang. She said it with something close to softness. 1 hour, that's all. He looked at her for a long moment, like he was calculating something that had nothing to do with business. Then he set the cold coffee down on the window ledge. 1 hour. She took him to Myeongdong. The night market was alive and loud and gloriously indifferent to who anyone was. Street food vendors called out across the noise. The smell of tteokbokki and grilled skewers and fresh hotteok hit them the moment they stepped out of the car. Tae-Hyun's bodyguards fanned out at a distance. Linda walked straight into the crowd without hesitating. She stopped at the first food stall and ordered 2 portions of tteokbokki without asking him what he wanted. She handed him a portion. He looked at the plastic container like it was a foreign object. When last did you eat street food? He thought about it genuinely. I don't remember. That's actually tragic. She nudged his arm. Eat this. He ate and said nothing for a long moment. Then, it's good. Linda smiled into her own container. It's always good. That's the whole point. They walked slowly through the market, past the jewelry stalls and the cosmetics vendors and the tourists taking photos of everything. Nobody recognized him out here. Nobody bowed or cleared a path or lowered their eyes. He was just a tall man in a dark coat walking through a night market eating street food. Linda glanced at him sideways. Something had loosened in his face. Not much, but enough. You've really never done this? She asked. Just walked around the city like a normal person? I haven't been a normal person since I was 9 years old. He said it simply without self-pity, like it was just a fact he had long made peace with. But Linda heard the thing underneath it. The thing he hadn't said, since I was 9 years old. What happened when you were 9? He was quiet for a long moment as the market moved noisily around them. The condition started, he said finally. Just like that? Suddenly? Yes. Something triggered it? He looked straight ahead, his jaw tight. Yes. She didn't push further. Instead she stopped at another stall and bought 2 hotdogs and pushed one into his hand. He looked down at it, then at her. You feed people when you don't know what else to do, he observed. My mother's habit, she said simply. Food means I'm not giving up on you yet. The words landed between them quietly. Neither of them looked at each other for a moment. The market swirled around them, loud and warm and completely alive. And Kang Tae-Hyun, who had not stood in a place like this since he was a child, felt something loosen further in his chest. Something he didn't have a name for yet. Something that felt dangerously close to belonging. On the walk back to the car, Linda stopped suddenly. She was looking at the Han River in the distance. The city lights reflected off the water in long trembling lines. Do you ever just stand somewhere and feel it? She asked quietly. Feel what? Everything. She gestured at the city around them. The noise, the people, the fact that all of this is just happening. All the time. With or without you. Tae-Hyun looked at the river, then at her profile against the city lights. No, he said honestly. I don't. She turned to look at him. That's what I thought. She started walking again. That's what I'm going to fix. She said it so simply, so matter-of-factly. Like it wasn't an enormous thing to say to the most dangerous man in Seoul. Like she had just decided it and that was that. Tae-Hyun stood on the pavement and watched her walk ahead of him through the glowing city. His bodyguards waited at a careful distance. The river glittered. The city hummed. And something inside Kang Tae-Hyun, something that had been locked and bolted and buried for 25 years, shifted just slightly, just enough. He had spent his entire life controlling everything around him. But somewhere between the street food and the river and a girl who talked to him like he was just a man, he had lost control of something far more dangerous. His own heart. 3 floors below, in the Hanseong Tower operations room, Kang Seo-jin sat alone at his desk. On his screen was security footage from the building's exterior camera of 2 figures walking toward a waiting car. He closed the footage, picked up his phone, and dialed. It's progressing faster than expected, he said quietly. I'll handle it. He hung up and sat very still in the dark. It started with a feeling, the kind that sits at the back of your neck and won't leave. Linda first noticed them on a Tuesday. 3 men standing across the street from the Hanseong Tower employee exit, not doing anything. Just standing and watching the door. She told herself it was nothing. Seoul was a big city, so people stood on streets. But then she saw them again on Thursday. Different street, same men. This time one of them looked directly at her and didn't look away, just smiled slowly. The kind of smile that isn't friendly. The kind that tells you someone has already made a decision about you. Linda walked faster and didn't look back. She didn't tell Tae-Hyun. She didn't want to be the girl who ran to a powerful man every time something made her uncomfortable. She had handled Seoul alone for 3 months, so she could handle 3 men standing on a street. But Friday night there were 5 of them, and they weren't standing across the street anymore. They were right outside the exit, leaning against the wall, talking quietly among themselves. One of them pushed off the wall when he saw her. Hey you. Linda kept walking. Hey, I am talking to you. She walked faster. African girl, I said hey. She turned the corner sharply and broke into a near run until she reached the subway entrance and didn't stop until she was through the barrier and on the platform with people around her. She stood there trying to catch her breath as she told herself it was fine, that it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. She didn't sleep well that night or the night after. By Sunday, she had mapped 3 different routes from the building exit to the subway entrance, varying her path each night, leaving at different times, staying close to crowds. She didn't tell anyone. Not her roommate, not anyone at work, and definitely not Tae-Hyun. What she didn't know was that Tae-Hyun already knew. His security team had flagged the men on day 2. Low-level street gang, no significant affiliation, opportunistic. The kind that watched patterns and waited for the right moment. Young-ho had brought the report to Tae-Hyun's desk on Wednesday morning. Tae-Hyun had read it once, set it down, and looked out at the city for a long time without speaking. Double her building security escort to the exit, he said finally. Quietly, I don't want her to know. And the men. His jaw tightened. I'll handle the men. But handling them took longer than expected. Because Tae-Hyun wanted to do it in a way that left no trail back to Linda. No reason for anyone to connect her to him publicly. He was careful about that. Careful in the way that only a man who understood exactly what his world could do to someone unprotected was careful. On Monday night, Linda left work at her new earlier time. Took her third alternate route. Her head down and moving fast. She was 1 block from the subway when she heard the footsteps behind her. Without thinking, she turned into a brighter street. But the footsteps followed. She turned again, they followed again. Her heart was loud in her ears now. She pulled out her phone, opened her contacts, scrolled past her roommate, past her university friend, past her mother's number which she couldn't call at this hour without causing panic, and stopped on a name she hadn't expected to stop on. Kang Tae-Hyun. He had put his number in her phone 3 weeks ago without asking. She had deleted it, but he had put it back in. She had left it the second time without examining why. As her thumb hovered over the name, the footsteps got closer. She immediately pressed the call button. It rang once. Linda. Not hello, just her name. Like he had been waiting for this exact call. There are men following me, she said quietly. I'm on Yuljiaro. 1 block from. I know where you are, he said. Keep walking, don't run. My men are 30 seconds away. You know where I. Keep walking, Linda. She kept walking. 20 seconds later, 2 black cars rolled quietly around the corner ahead of her. 4 men stepped out and positioned themselves between her and the street behind her without a single word. The footsteps behind her stopped and retreated, then disappeared entirely. One of Tae-Hyun's men opened the rear door of the first car. Linda stood on the pavement breathing carefully. Her hands were steady, but her heart was not. She got in the car. Tae-Hyun was waiting at the building when she arrived, standing in the private underground entrance. With his jacket on this time, every button done, every wall back up. The controlled, dangerous version of him. Not the man who had eaten street food in Myeongdong. Linda stepped out of the car and looked at him. You've been watching me? Yes. No apology in it, no hesitation. How long? Since the second night they appeared outside the exit. She stared at him. That was 10 days ago. Yes. And you didn't tell me. No. Why not? He held her gaze steadily. Because you would have handled it alone, he said quietly. And got hurt proving you could. The words landed hard because they were true and they both knew it. Linda looked at him for a long moment. The underground entrance was silent around them. Just the two of them and the low hum of the city above. Are they gone? She asked. They won't bother you again. The way he said it left no room for follow-up questions. She nodded slowly and looked down at her hands, then back up at him. Thank you, she said quietly. It was the first time she had ever said those words to him. Something moved in his expression. Go home, Linda, he said softly. Get some sleep. She walked toward the elevator and stopped with her hand on the door but didn't turn around. Tae-Hyun. First time she had ever used his name without the title. She heard him go completely still behind her. Don't make me regret trusting you. She stepped into the elevator and the doors closed. He had protected her without letting her see it. She had thanked him without letting him hear how much she meant it. And somewhere in the space between those two things, something irreversible had already begun. Now this is where we leave them for now. But here is what neither of them knows yet. Someone has been watching. Someone who has spent 12 years inside Tae-Hyun's world. Someone who just made a phone call. And what happens next, in part 2, will test everything Linda and Tae-Hyun have built in ways neither of them saw coming. So if this story moved you today, subscribe, like this video, and share it with one person who needs a beautiful story. I will see you in part 2.